Hello, I think I'm live. Cool. Hi everyone, I am Amy Shaw, and this is the first kind of big talk I've ever done in my life, so, you know, I hope it goes well for you guys as well as me. So I am usually defined as an automotive and lifestyle photographer, even though after 4 years of hearing that, it sounds a bit weird because all I feel like I do is take pictures of cool people and some really cool metal boxes with wheels. So this is the kind of thing I shoot. My aim for the next 45 minutes is to not only talk about the process of photographing cars and people, but also to remind you that it's alright to feel a little bit lost or stuck or out of your depth when it comes to photography. With that, I'm going to start by telling you a rather embarrassing story. You are honestly some of the first people I have ever said this to because I'm still mortified. So, barely a year after I put that picture on, I took my first photograph of a car ever. I was asked to photograph an exciting project for Land Rover. They had built a stunning Land Rover pedal car for kids, and it was my job to photograph the concept pedal car along with the first Land Rover ever made. A doddle, I thought, this will be fine. So I was there, waiting for this pedal car to appear. Just keep that in your mind, I was waiting for a pedal car. And then I see a Land Rover coming down the path. And I said to the guy next to me, he's like, oh, it's a bit big, isn't it, for a kid's pedal car? And they're like, yeah, that's because it's the real size Land Rover. I was like, oh dear. So yeah, that's right, I actually mistook the most famous Land Rover ever made for a child's pedal toy. It's safe to say I got the job finished as quick as I possibly could and got out of there, only to lie in bed awake many years later, unable to get over that fact. So don't ever be worried that your lack of knowledge in a subject means that you can't necessarily photograph and succeed in that area. You don't have to know everything about a genre of photography to make your own mark. You also, as it turns out, don't necessarily need to know much about the thing you're photographing either. You and I, we are visual creatures. We look at light, colour and shape. We will do that whether we're looking through our viewfinder of a car or an animal, a person, a building, a mountain. We're all looking for beautiful balances between those aspects, light, colour and shape. When I first started photographing cars, I quite obviously knew very little about cars. I fell into the genre simply by saying yes to an exciting opportunity. But what I did know was that the curve of a back wheel arch was beautifully crafted, that the car's headlights looked great when they were reflected off wet tarmac, that a door handle looked so much more interesting when there was a hand reaching for it. It was like seeing a shape I knew very well for the very first time all over again. Many people that I chat to want to know how to break into the photography business. And I'm not going to lie, it's not a walk in the park. I started off as a wedding photographer because I thought it was the easiest area of photography to break into, and I had lots of friends and acquaintances that were getting married and wanting a cheap photographer, and I loved shooting them. I love this picture. Weddings really were what ended up teaching me the skills to photograph people under stressful situations, as their circumstances, and how to think fast on your feet. In the mornings, you'd be a professional, ready to start the day and kind of geared, ready for whatever was going to come along. And then by the end of the night, you're doing the chatter slide with the bride's great Aunt Maud. And more than once, I have been one of the very last people standing at a wedding simply because I've been having so much fun. This was the first car I ever photographed in my entire life. It is a replica Ferrari P4 for any car folk out there. Friends of mine had built it and they'd asked me to photograph it just simply for their own documentation because I was the person that they knew who had a nice camera and liked taking pictures. Which my first camera at this point was a Nikon D600, my first full-frame camera. Despite having a nice camera, despite never having shot a car before in my life, I said yes and just kind of blagged my way through the shoot. Richard Branson once said, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity, say yes, then figure out how to do it later. And that's basically what I did with this. I put the images onto social media, and as this is such an iconic machine, they ended up going viral. People headed to my website and checked out the rest of my work, and so that's one thing. Remember, your website is literally the first thing that people are ever going to see, so kind of make sure it's really awesome if you can. Make sure it's easy to navigate around, shows your best work, and most importantly, makes it easy to get in touch with you. These days, people have got a really short attention span, and if things aren't easy to find online, people won't always go to the effort, frustratingly. After this initial surge of views, I decided that this car photography malarkey was actually quite fun, and would be a good thing to carry on with. I knew that my initial spike of interest in my work would probably die down pretty quickly, and that would be the end of my very short-lived automotive career, unless I did something about it. So I contacted the only car magazine that I knew and liked, which was Octane magazine, if any of you know of it. I dropped them an email, which went along the lines of, "Hi, I've just photographed a car, and I think photographs are all right. Do you want to hire me? Smiley face, Amy." That was literally it. Very kindly, they invited me to their office to have a look at some of my pictures. Looking through my rather limited portfolio, they were very lovely to me, but said that I really needed some more examples of car work, showing things that I could do like panning shots and tracking shots. So off I went and I photographed my dad's Austin Mini, trying out different shutter speeds and f-stops, experimenting with Photoshop's ability to add motion blur. I sent them the photographs, but I was turned down again because the harsh truth was, at that point, I wasn't good enough for their standard. And it was a horrible truth to accept, but it was the truth. If you're continually showing your work to potential clients, but not getting any jobs, you may not be quite at the level of work they need just yet, but that's totally okay. Really scrutinise your own work against those images in the magazine and think, what makes them different to you? How can you alter your work to become as good and better than them? So I wasn't quite good enough for Octane just yet. I decided to email a number of other people and organisations so I could show them my work too. People won't necessarily just stumble across your work on your website or your social media. Sometimes you've got to help them out a little bit. One of these organisations was Goodwood, and for those of you who don't know, they have some of the biggest car shows in the world. I had taken my dad to an event of theirs just a couple of months previously and sent Goodwood the photographs via a Facebook message of all sorts. I later found out that it was pure fluke that they had ever read it. Over 2 months later, they called me to invite them to shoot at a new event that they were hosting, to which I confidently gave them my day rate fee, which I googled whilst I was on the phone. And they're like, "So yeah, what's your rate?" I'm like, and so just don't worry about that, just kind of blag it as you're going along. But to my great surprise, they agreed to. I didn't know it at the time, but that would be one of the many, many events that I'd cover at Goodwood over the following years. Everything that I have ever learned about about photography has been from Google, YouTube, and talking to other photographers. Trial and error is honestly your best friend. I will quite openly admit to many of you that many of you in this room will know more about photography and the technical side of things than I do, because that was never my personal interest in the beginning, and for some of you it may be the thing you love, and some of you are more creative. It's what makes us a great mixture of photographers. About 6 months into freelancing, I met one of Jaguar Land Rover's top photographers called Nick Dimbleby. I asked him, honestly, about a million questions about everything. And some of them I felt quite rude, like, how much money do you make? And, you know, what should I aim towards? And what day rates do you charge? And do you travel days or kind of editing time, usage? All of these questions that unless you actually talk to people in the business, it's so hard to find online. You use some of these calculators and it's like, you should charge £3,000 for this one picture. I'm like, really? So it's nice to actually talk to a human being. Don't worry about asking like loads of questions to people, because as photographers, we want to try and help you out, and you know, we want to have you help us as well. It's great talking to all the photographers here, like all the ambassadors, because you learn so much stuff from each other. I took this shot literally just last week and I thought I'd just throw it in. So, one of the best tips that I can give to you to begin getting work, and it sounds straightforward, but it has to be said, be a nice person. This dude was super miserable throughout the whole shoot. He had a great face though. This dude, on the other hand, is fantastic. The amount of opportunities that myself and other photographer friends have been given simply by just being a lovely person, enjoying the company of those that you're with and getting along well with someone, or just doing a small photography favour are just too many to count. The amount of people you'll hear saying it was a fluke, like chance of meeting somebody and just getting on with somebody that led to their career is so true. People will remember your face, your laughter, your jokes, and you as a whole so much more than a business card. Be open and friendly and enthusiastic, hard-working, up for suggestions, and for goodness sake, smile. You know, you're doing the thing that you love, which kind of leads me on to my next point. The key, or one of the keys, there seem to be many keys, to success in almost anything is that you absolutely have to enjoy it. I mean, I don't think any of us would be here today if we didn't enjoy photography. But I don't just mean that. You've got to enjoy your subject. You want to show the viewer what you see when you take a photograph. You absolutely have to be passionate about it, because when it gets super tough and you feel like giving up, it is that passion that will keep you going. You know, any wedding photographers here, it can be super tough, but when you really, really enjoy your couples and your subjects, it makes the day so more personal. You just want the couple to be happy and to shoot everything you can for them. I have recently read one of Don McCullum's many books, and so I will be quoting him a few times just to warn you about that. One of the exciting things he says, which I totally agree with, is your work is best when you're exhilarated and excited. It's not always going to be a 24/7 experience, and that is okay. For me, people intrigue me. I want to learn about them, about why they're here, how they got here, what's next. I want to tell their story without having to utter a single word. Thankfully, my job allows me to shoot two birds with one stone or camera. I got to learn all of these fascinating stories from the car world and tell them back to people around the world in the form of photography. Okay, I want all of you now to do something for me. Really think what interests you, okay? What excites you? What do you want to share with the world? A type of object, a group of people, a time of day, a culture, an idea. Whatever's in your mind, that is what you should be photographing, however specific that is, because that is where your passions are. McCullen also said that photography for me is not looking, it's feeling. If you can't feel what you're looking at, then you're never going to be able to get others to feel anything when they look at your pictures. The car world is what grabbed me. Here are these beautiful machines and a wide range of incredibly interesting characters around them, from owners to mechanics, spectators to racing drivers. Each one of them has got a common interest to end up in the same world, and it's my job and pure pleasure to photograph them in their natural habitat. Whether that's workshops, driveways, events, city streets, country lanes. It's my job to bring the cars to life. And the way I've found this, to do this, is to include people. A car is lifeless without a driver. I feel so lucky that I get to learn all of these fascinating stories from the world and, as I said earlier, portray them. The ability to photograph people in their most original state is something that we will all have to battle at some point if there's a human element somewhere in our genre of photography. Whether that's weddings or street, fashion, behind the scenes, events, photojournalism, the human element will make or break the shot. And the key is really to connect with your subject. Sometimes you'll have an hour, sometimes you'll have a fraction of a second. When I turn up to a day-long shoot, I'll make sure I spend the time to say hello to the person or group of people that I'll be working with and show my genuine interest in them. I'll ask them about their interests in the automotive world, how they got to this point today. If you don't know much about them or about the topic, be honest with them, tell them that. They'll more than likely want to share their stories and knowledge and experience with you. It may even inspire you to do something new yourselves. I ended up photographing a lot of motorbike shoots and bikers in general, but I didn't really know how to connect with them. They are a whole different world to the car world. So, about 2.5 years ago, I learned how to ride motorbikes. Since then, I've used my new hobby as a talking point for both car and bike shoots, creating a common bond between myself and my subject. So, something I get asked a lot, what is it like being a girl in the car world, because there's not too many of us. And it does mean that I need to try a little bit harder to connect with my subjects. So, not all of them, some of them. So, cars, bikes, and music are my go-to subjects. I once had to photograph this very, very wealthy man who had a very famous car workshop and everything. He was in about his 70s, and from the moment that I met him, I felt like he didn't trust me. This 24-year-old girl with a single small backpack of camera gear flitting around his workshop and taking pictures of glee. So I knew that if I had to tell his story, I wanted to get on his side. As I began photographing his workshop, I asked him about the history with the business and about his family and his car collection, and in turn, I began to talk about my motorbike, and I own a classic Mini, and that my dad used to work in Formula One, and over time, I kind of got onto the subject that I just passed my bike test. His interest in me suddenly became much more genuine. We started chatting about bikes, with him talking about his first family car being a Mini, and talking about what bike I rode and was interested in. With our common interests, I was able to photograph him and joke with him and gain his trust to the point where I think he actually enjoyed the shoot just a little bit. But as I mentioned earlier, when trying to connect with subjects, I don't always have the luxury of time. Especially at events like these, where moments are purely fleeting, I'm trying to capture as many of them as possible. I'll take someone's picture and I can see the confused scowl through my viewfinder. But as soon as I lower my camera, I'll tell them honestly why I photographed them. I love your hat. You've got a wonderful face to photograph. You look like you're quite comfortable sitting there in your chairs. The way the light is falling on your face is beautiful. Compliment them. Make them feel at ease. Make them realise that yes, they are so wonderful in that moment that you wanted to take their picture and save that moment in time. But remember to smile and show your warmth. It can be quite intimidating to have your photograph taken. Here are a few examples of those scowls. I never noticed this until one day I put an Instagram post, and every single one, someone said, look at all those scowls that people have given you. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't ever notice that before. This guy had got his eyes closed whilst working until he heard my shutter click. Then looked up, and this is the second frame. This chap is now a friend of mine. He's called Shane. We got caught in this horrific downpour whilst they were lining up the next race, which, to no surprise, was cancelled. Multi-million-pound racing cars were literally sloshing with water in the footwells. It was quite a sight. I promise you, they do smile almost immediately afterwards. For me, the photographs that are most difficult to take are the ones of people whose language I do not speak. I took this in Prague just last year. Don McCullen said, I did tell you I was quoting him a lot, "You have very little time, but you very much want to have the consent of the people, even if you do not speak the language, and eye contact is the key." He's totally right. It's kind of like breaking down that barrier between people, and I think animals will do things as well, and it's all, your eye contact can mean so much, more so than words. I can't compliment them. The best I can do is look at them, smile broadly, and just, give them a little wave in an attempt for them to understand that I'm not an evil, sneaky photographer trying to steal their picture, but a curious one, just trying to document their life, and a bit more about them. Hang out with your subjects. These people often become friends after the shoot. When I photographed my first ever car, my favourite part of the day was photographing the guys as we ate fish and chips in the sun together, or when one of them came and sat in the workshop next to me as I was flicking through the images of the day. They were comfortable with me photographing them, and it really shows because we were friends. It gave the images more depth. Capturing atmosphere is not always easy, especially when you're shooting still images of cars. Sometimes you'll be lucky and the light will just be gorgeous, one of these golden mornings or evenings, and your location is stunning. But sometimes you really do have to try a little bit harder. When shooting cars, you've got to forget it's a car. Shoot it like a person. Stand much further back to give the car environment and a story around it. The biggest mistake I honestly see in people who ask my opinion of their car work is that they're way too close to the car. They are so passionate in their car that even though they want to show its whole story, they are only focusing on that. Just stand back a bit. They don't give the viewer to understand its environment around. Crop bits off, include someone's hands or feet, include foreground to add depth to the location. I'm now going to talk about capturing moments. It's one thing to be at the right place at the right time, but to consciously realise that fact is a complete other matter. You need to be willing to be lucky. There are so many times that you will have been and will be in the right place at the right time. But you need to be truly ready to open your eyes and look. You need to be ready for a moment that's about to happen. If you can see a couple getting close, expect a kiss. If you can see a group pushing a car, look forwards to where they're going to be pushing it to. Run to that spot and then just be ready. And kind of crash down, whatever you're going to do. Look at everything. Shoes, hands, wheels, piles of tools, hand movements, greetings, goodbyes. They are all moments that will lead to a picture somewhere, and sometimes, more often than not, you won't believe your luck at the images you end up capturing. With this particular picture particularly, they were all kind of starting to run off the grid. And the odd couple of people were jumping over the wall. This guy just happened to be very good at jumping over a wall, and I was ready because I managed to see a couple of other people giving it a go. This image, for example, last year I was asked by Mini if I wanted to go and do a road trip in a classic Mini from Germany to Ireland, and they decided to take me along. By day 6, we'd reached Dublin, and of course we headed to the Guinness factory. After doing a couple of drives around the block, we found this great looking sign, and I wanted to photograph the car with it. So I got into position and I took a couple of shots, and then I noticed further down the street this cyclist coming along. So quickly kind of like changed my settings and got into my position, and then I caught this. So there's two frames of this shot, one where the cyclist is just before, and then this one. For me, I love how the bike's wheels kind of line up perfectly around the Mini's wheels. I'm pretty sure that if I'd set that up, I would not be able to repeat that again. Just like, yeah, as crisp as that. I keep looking at it and thinking, I'm really pleased with that. I just simply was in the right place at the right time and saw a moment about to happen. Another moment is this. This is an example of a shot from last year's Goodwood Revival. For those of you who don't know, you all dress up in like 30s to 50s gear, and there's lots of really expensive old racing cars racing around. It's really fun and really atmospheric, even for people that don't enjoy car stuff. I was wandering through the paddocks quite early in the morning and just chatting to a friend that I bumped into. As we were talking in the paddock, on the other side, one of the cars started up, and they're really loud, so you're practically shouting over one another. So I was like, I'm just going to go and check that out, and I just kind of wandered off because they couldn't hear me. As I turned the corner, I saw this, and I was like, grab my camera. I decided that it'd probably be, so basically, I grabbed I have a Nikon D5 that I had at the time on my left hip, and then I had a Nikon D750 on my right, with the 85mm 1.4 lens on my D5, and 35 1.4 on my D750. The exhaust fumes only lingered like this for 5 seconds, and then they kind of start to filter out. I photographed first with the 85mm and got this shot, and then quickly changed to my I have my D850 actually, and I've got loads of shots of this particular moment. But for me, it was this first 5 seconds of fumes which was the shot for me. If I'd not been there at that moment, I wouldn't have got this. Some of the pictures after this, the light has just begun to filter through it more strongly, and it's so crisp. It looks like I photoshopped it in, and it doesn't quite look it's too crisp. I like it's a bit more kind of, atmospheric and exhaust fumey. Robert Capa once said, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And when it comes to making someone feel like they're really living in that moment, it's such a true quote. 99% of the time, I shoot with 2 bodies and 4 lenses. This is what my total kit consists of when I'm on a shoot. Like everything. So I've got my incredible Nikon D850 and my D5, 35mm prime, 85mm prime. Then I carry an additional 24 and 50mm, both prime. My lens choice is always going to be the 35mm, but I've been tempted recently by the 28mm, which I've kind of been eyeing up on the stand. The 35mm is like my lens that I go to for most of my shoots, because I feel personally works for me in the way that it allows me to connect with my subject, but to honestly portray still what's in front of me. Too wide and I feel like I'm given too much information. I want to kind of focus my viewer a little bit more on the subject. But too narrow and you feel like you're more a bystander of a moment rather than living in that moment, wanting to show people you're experiencing that moment. My 85mm still allows me to be an onlooker, but still void from whatever is happening if it's something I can't physically partake in. That, along with the 50mm, are great car photography lenses, as too much distortion can alter the shape of a car. And so some clients won't like that because they're like, oh, that's not how it was designed. So those two, the 85 and the 50, are fantastic for those, and the 35, obviously. 24mm though is great for car-to-car tracking, because the peripheral vision allows for a greater feeling of movement when you're tracking with a slower shutter. It gives a much better sense of speed. I also use a couple of polarizing filters to help me battle some car reflections, especially for windscreens. I've then got my hold-fast harness, so I always have my cameras on me at all points. Bring a couple of batteries and memory cards, and that's basically it. It's all in one big rucksack. Don't feel like you need to have a huge collection of, cameras, lights, lenses, reflections, and other gear to take great photographs. That was one thing I always found, kind of scary when I was beginning to be a photographer. And the first shoot I ever went to for cars, I showed up at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and I had literally one camera and one lens at that point. I was a postgraduate, I wasn't even a student, just graduated, and this is all I could afford. So I showed up, and then there was these guys that had, lenses as long as your arm, and they all looked very expensive and fancy, and they're hanging off them, and I thought, I feel a bit scared here. I just thought, I'm just going to carry on and photograph anyway, and so don't worry about it. Another huge inspiration of mine, and probably to many of those here, is the very famous Henri Cartier-Bresson. For the majority of his life's work, he only used one camera with a 50mm lens. That's it. For the occasional shoot, I'll use a 70 to 200mm lens, which is honestly fantastic. But personally, I find it too heavy and just a little bit too intrusive to use all the time in jobs that I do. If my brief is to shoot track shots like this, then it's great because I can't physically get closer to the action. Prime lenses, for me at least, make me move more, make me experience more, make me think more. It's the same with light. Unless specifically asked for by the client, I don't use any light other than what's available to me. The limitations of lenses and light mean that I have to think more about the shot and I have to hunt for something. Some photographers I know don't like the lack of control, but for me, I love it. I love the anticipation of it. When the light begins to drop at an event like Goodwood Revival, that's when I start to have fun. I hunt for the paddock lights and coming from inside the huts, fairground lights on faces, and torches on cars attempting to be fixed for the following day's race. Suddenly I've been given a whole new world of excitement, and I want to capture it all. I took these shots whilst wandering around the Goodwood paddocks after the qualifying had finished. Some people were cleaning up, some fixing cars that they crashed, and the whole place is just quiet, but still buzzing with this energy. You can hear people laughing and drinking somewhere around the circuit. Depending on the light, I'll shoot these images at like ISO 1600 or more, with a wide aperture and a fairly slow shutter speed. I don't mind motion blur, and especially at night, because I feel that you need that motion of people walking or dancing or cars being pushed. It gives a very slow medium motion. Do the best with what you've been given. The amount of times I see car photographers at shows get frustrated because people keep walking in front of their shot of the car, just don't let it bother you. Why not include things like legs and feet? It's showing curiosity in the car. Photograph over people's shoulders. Your viewer will also feel like they really want to see the car that's got all the attention of these people. If anything, I more often than not wait for people to walk past the cars that I'm shooting. And even on some shoots, I'll set up like walkers. So often I'll have like a client walking across, and people then really think about how they walk. They're like, am I being a bit leggy or feety? And just so I've got a human element somewhere in the picture. If you want to shoot a single car well and worthwhile of a portfolio, you absolutely have to take it away from the car event. Understandably, this isn't always an option if you're trying to photograph your 20 million Ferrari 250 GTO. But in that case, take a photograph for your own enjoyment, but just don't put it into your portfolio. People like magazines, publications, potential clients, they want to see your skill as a photographer, not just what cars you've managed to spot and shoot. As I mentioned earlier, I did my practice shots to approach more magazines using my dad's classic Mini because it was the prettiest car I had easily available to me. On a drizzly Sunday afternoon in November, I precariously hung out the back of my mum's Honda estate car and did tracking shots around our local country roads. I photographed the car like I would a person because, as I mentioned, that was all I'd ever photographed. I found my personal favourite features of the car, purely from a visual interest because I knew nothing about the car itself. And I photographed the moment that we took the car from the garage to the very last shot where we drove it home again. The car suddenly had a story. A day trip out of the garage, where it whizzed along country lanes and dazzled next to contrasting colours. Cropping bits of the car gave its size some humour, whilst other shots were highlighting certain features like reflections or body design. The jack in the back told me that I probably shouldn't trust this car on long journeys. You really, really should not. And photographing my dad with the car made the car have life and companionship. It's still one of my favourite shoots to this day. This picture is really big on the other side of this if you want to see. It was cool seeing that this morning. There are no set rules when it comes to any type of photography, at all. If there are rules, ask, are they really needed? And try breaking them. Sometimes you'll very quickly find, oh, actually, yeah, they are needed. But others, you'll think, oh, okay, this is pretty cool, this is different. When I Googled the night before my first car shoot, how to photograph a car, I felt like I was flooded with highly photoshopped, multi-lit photographs, all on a tripod, and suddenly I felt well out of my depth. I debated calling off the shoot because I thought, I don't know how I'm going to begin photographing this car tomorrow, like any of these. Panic. I didn't actually even own a tripod until last month, 2018, and I've been doing this for over 4 years. It's human nature to compare, to learn from others, but simply by copying what you've already got in front of you, it's like walking the wrong way on a moving escalator. Nothing's being gained. There are probably a number of car photographers out there who don't think I'm great at taking pictures of cars, or, because I don't use a tripod, and I have a shallow depth of field, and half the back end of the car is dropping out of focus because of this. Or, I've got loads of reflections. But I don't think I would be standing here if I had followed all the rules. Theodore Roosevelt is quoted saying, "Comparison is the thief of joy," which I agree, it can be. So compare to challenge yourself, to challenge what you already know, not to feel disheartened. Be inspired by others. It's only recently that I've been probably reading through my photography books that I've been having, lying in my bookcase for years. Reading about other photographers and their thought process, that then look at their work, inspires me personally so much. Inspiration doesn't purely have to be from other photographers, but from painters, cinematographers, directors. It's just talking about visual inspiration. Something people often ask me is the process of how I shoot and edit my images. So I'm going to give you a very brief insight to my workflow. This might be a bit technical. For me it is. Firstly, I shoot on manual setting for everything. I want full control over my ISO, my aperture, and my shutter speed. I'll often flit between settings depending on what I'm after. Sometimes very quickly. For example, if I'm in pit lane, I'll need to photograph panning shots of a race car one moment, but then I'll notice a great headshot and I'll flick back to a quicker shutter speed. But I also need to remember that this figure is in partial shade because of the top of the pit lane, so I need to take that into consideration. And so I'll use my exposure meter inside my viewfinder to give me a quick idea on exposure, and then I'll take my shot, such as this. It's taken me a hell of a lot of very bad photographs to kind of get the hang of doing this, but it's definitely the best way I like to work. The only auto I use is auto, balance and focus. From a single day's shoot, I'll usually produce between 1,000 and 2,000 raw images. Times that by a 7-day road trip, and suddenly you're taking a lot of pictures. The first thing I do is copy all of my images onto 2 different hard drives, so my laptop and an external hard drive. I want to make sure that I'm completely covered if something was to go wrong or something corrupted, or if I'm back on it, I've got them separated, just to make sure it's all safe. I definitely did this when I did weddings as well. That's where I learned it from. I then open up Lightroom and I'll import all of my files. Starting from image 1 in order of capture time, and I'll start flagging images red if I like them, or just leaving them blank, the ones that I don't. I know that some people use a star system to help them figure it out, but sometimes you really have to be brutal. If you're not sure about an image, give it a yes, and then decide later when you're editing. This is kind of what it begins to look like. Just last month, I was in Sweden taking photographs for Jaguar Land Rover and their Ice Academy, which is basically like an epic ice track where you go drifting around these snowy roads. It's really good fun. These images were taken last month, and over the 3 days I was there, I took well over 5,000 shots. I ended up giving JLR just over 1,000 images. When I first started shooting, I'd be happy with about a tenth of the images that I shot, if that. So I've managed to bring that figure up a bit. As you can see from this bit here, I wasn't happy with most of them. The old one, I thought, yeah, that's all right, I'll keep that. And I think even then I probably ended up with about 2 of work my images. Once I've worked my way through the whole shoot, I'll rename my flagged images to something more shoot-specific. This helps me, be able to define the images that I've chosen against my binned images when I'm just looking at file names. And I am the only person I know that does this, I open up about 300 images into Photoshop's raw editor. If I'm having a really low motivational day, it might only be like 100 or 200. But by breaking them down into more manageable chunks, I'm able to focus better, rather than having like a daunting 1,000 photographs in front of me in Lightroom when you're trying to go through the development of that. It just mentally, for me, makes it much easier. I'll select them all and first apply my own homemade presets to the lot. Some people will use pre-used presets and some a mixture of the two. But sometimes your preset won't work on every image. The white balance will get totally confused and think that the image should be very yellow and suddenly feel like you're in a badly edited Wes Anderson film or something like that. Therefore, I start working through each image individually to work out what looks best for that image. There'll be some times where I photograph something so underexposed because of either the lack of light or I'm on the completely wrong settings because I've not done it quick enough and right, that you have to kind of work to get the image back. But I know it'll be worth it. This is my pure raw image. I click my preset, creatively named Edit, and then apply it to all my photos, which creates this. As you can see, the auto white balance of Photoshop thinks that the snow should be bright blue. Now, you can use various white balance tools to help with the corrections, but I often feel that doing things by eye kind of makes things a little bit more realistic because it was you that was standing there, that it was you that was experiencing that moment and wants to portray that moment back. Your editing software wasn't. It was after sunset and things did look bluer, but not that blue. It wasn't as light as the auto exposure told me it should be. After my edit, this is what I produced. I used the autos as a guide, but I made my own judgment to what I believe the images should look like. It turns out that snow is really tough to get right. Just white or grey, you need like a blue sky or something to kind of help you out a bit. Oh, and white cars on white snow, you're lost, honestly. This is also the point where I'll begin to choose between my images that I'm not too sure about, the ones where I wasn't sure if I should flag them yes or no earlier. You can see that the one above, I've just been like, nah, of those 2 images, I prefer at least this one over the previous one. This process is repeated until I'm through my 300 images or so, to which I then export as JPEGs, and I make myself a cup of tea while they kind of sort themselves out. This process is then repeated and so on through everything. I think it's a really important thing to figure out your own editing style, which I know in this day and age with all the filters that you can buy and apply, it can be really difficult. Of course there will be trends. There always has been. Impressionism, Cubism, Expressionism, Surrealism. Perhaps this era is called Instagramsm or something like that. I'm not sure. But the point is, you can still have your own editing style inside of these movements. All these movements will change, your style will change. My pictures will not look the same now as they will do in 10 years' time, or 20 years' time if I'm still doing this. Don't worry about moving it on. If I look backwards, this is quite a recent image, bad example, but my editing style has changed. I look back at some of my images and I think, oh, actually, I've noticed how my blacks were even less black than they are now, and even now I have quite kind of a hazy look. I'm always tweaking little bits here and there. I don't realise the difference until I put my latest images next to some older images. I change them as I begin to see other people's images and think, I kind of like that aspect of their edit. Let's see what happens if I add something similar to mine and see what we come out with. Sometimes it'll look awesome and I think, I kind of prefer my look with that. I feel like I've got my own style but kind of moved it along a bit. Other times I look at it and think, that's really crap, and go back to my other one. It's taken me a very long time and a hell of a lot of mistakes to be able to stand here and talk to you guys today. I'm sure I'm going to make many more mistakes yet. Everything I've spoken about today is purely from what I've learned from my own trial and error, and is not necessarily the best way to go about things. Ricky Gervais once said, the best advice I've ever received is, no one else knows what they're doing either. And I think it's a very worthwhile thing to remember. It's like when you suddenly realise that you've become an adult and you think, I'm just out of my overdraft, I'm eating more than kind of plain pasta, and I'm adult. It's kind of the same running your own photography career. You get something that works and you're like, okay, this is happening, I'm going to just keep doing this and figuring out the perfections on the way. Some of us have a better idea of what we're doing and got a grasp of things and know where they're heading in 5 years' time. But I don't know about you, but I still feel like we're all just stumbling our way through it and having a little self-victory dance when something goes right. Don't worry if you don't feel like you've got it all figured out. None of us do. And if you think you have got it all figured out, then perhaps you're not challenging yourself enough. I've learnt that many people will help you along your own photography journey. Whether you want it to be a business or to simply enjoy it as a hobby. Just be prepared to say yes to any of the exciting opportunities that come your way, even if it scares you and you think this is totally out of my depth, I'm not ready for this. If any of you want to learn a little bit more about my work in depth, or how I manage clients, or more insight to the technical details or other general tips, I did write a blog post called The Giant How-To of Car Photography, which might interest you if you want to take a look at. I'm also going to be around the stage if any of you want to ask some more questions too. That's it. Thank you very much.